Happy Sunday evening, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Humanity's Past to Illuminate Our Future is our topic tonight. You're in the right place if you're looking for Circle TV, looking for Level Up. It's just my dear sister happens to be at a gala tonight, a gala to support actually an organization that our newest anthology is going to support, focused on domestic violence. So she is off partying in Southern California, and I'm Susanna Dawn, and I'm the one that's going to be here for tonight, and I get to talk with our guest, and we're in for a lot of fun tonight. I know this is going to be a great conversation. I want to start with a few of the announcements, and I'm going to start with the sponsor, one of our sponsors, Hounds of Business. We're always talking about collaboration over competition, the importance of it, how we can lift each other up. And we've been talking about this in our audio rooms. CJ has an audio room on LinkedIn every Sunday morning at 7:30 Pacific time. This has been a topic, and she talks collaboration over competition. That is what the Hounds do. The Hounds, it's a business focus. They're focused on business, yet it really is, how do you collaborate with everybody? Creating that collaboration to lift everybody up. It's focused on business, but you're also making friends in this organization. And that's Mike Ashebrainer there, the leader of the Hounds. Check out the Hounds of Business on LinkedIn. Check out Mike Ashebrainer. Scan the QR code and get a chance to really learn more about the Hounds. Because when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to working together, you could be in the same field. You can be working in the same area. You're entrepreneurs, but you're going to have different clients. You're going to connect with different clients. Think about how much more opportunity will happen when you collaborate. So lifting each other up, check out the Hounds. That's one of the things that we look at, is lifting everybody up. I also want to bring up the most recent book that we did, Rebel with a Cause. It's dedicated to our sister Jess, and the proceeds for this book are going to support mental health. It was something that's important to us. It was something that was important to Jess, and Jess was definitely a rebel. This book is available in Amazon, as Kindle, as a paperback. Check it out. These are stories of authors who are rebels. Every one of those faces you see is a rebel in terms of what they've done, how they basically took their life and moved forward as who they knew they were, and the rebel that they were, and the way that they ended up creating an amazing life for themselves. And that leads me into the next book, which we're still open. It's still open for the next, until Halloween, for Author's Call. And joining this book, Against the Grain, Finding Belonging in a World of Resistance. It's something that we've talked about, the importance of belonging. I can take you right back to the Hounds of Business that I talked about. They look at creating a sense of belonging, a place where you're safe to be with others and grow. And especially when you find that tight group, you find that close connection of people that you can talk about anything. You can tell them how you're doing, and you can be honest. You can be open with them. It's one of the most beautiful things when you find that space. So if you've been trying to fit in, you're trying to maybe be what you're not, you're wearing a cover when you walk into the workplace, that's not belonging. Belonging is being able to drop the covers. Belonging is being able to go into a space as your authentic self. And it's such an important thing when you can do that, to be your authentic self. And so what I want to do now, we're just going to dive into this one, and I'm going to bring up my guest tonight, the amazing Miguel. Hey, Miguel.
Hello, hi Susanna. Hello, everyone watching.
And you're going to be an author in the next book. So
Yes,
this will be your second book.
my second book with Level Up Academy. I decided to contribute another chapter in Against the Grain, and yeah, it's exciting.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm anxious to see everybody that we've got, because I know we've got a lot of authors coming into this one. It's going to be that focus on belonging. And so, what I want to ask you, we're still in the midst of Authors Call. Some people might be thinking, "Oh, why I'm not good enough," or they're questioning their writing. What was your experience with us for that first book you were in?
The I enjoyed the experience. It was very professional, and I liked how it was set up. Usually, this is my first writing in an anthology, but the assumption is that you need to already have the work. Um, you need to turn it in. It's probably not going to be any collaborations. Probably only the editor who's even reviewing your work, and that's probably going to be in isolation. So with Level Up Academy, it was a collaborative process. All the authors joined in a Zoom call, and we read our works to each other and collaborated. And I found that process unique, very important, and in of itself was inclusive of belonging and into the authors. And so I like the process so much. I want to be a part of it again. And also the revisions that was tied into the group process as well. And so having that structure, I entered into the anthology, not knowing the process, but I was very pleased with how Dr. Constance arranged everything. And I'm very satisfied with how my chapter came out. I just received the book in the mail, and I was reading it, and it's very impactful, which is what the point was.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We want to make it as comfortable and as fun as possible. And in your case, I know you had both of us looking at your chapter, so you got two of us to edit yours. and
Yes,
and you were so fast. It's like you've already sent me something to look at.
this
So
time around.
I have that one to you, but um, yeah, because
but
go ahead.
but I see this next one as like a logical continuation of the first chapter I wrote, and this chapter that I'm working on now, it's going to involve more leadership and organizational culture, and I think I can be a little more eloquent in that language. So that's what has me excited.
And it is a continuation, because it probably was by design, even though sometimes it's hard for us to see that we've designed it this way. Because the first book was Beyond Boundaries, Thriving in Life's Gray Zone. The second one was Moving Beyond Boxes, The Journey to Self-Discovery, which in many ways was a prequel to the first. Then we've got Rebel with a Cause, which was definitely a sequel, and this one for Against the Grain, Finding Belonging in a World of Resistance. In many ways, it can go before or after Rebel, kind of depending on how you want to paint your story, how you want to write it. So yeah, all of them, they really do intertwine and go together, which means I can't wait to see what comes up next year, because we do this quarterly. So for anybody that misses out on this one, we're going to be doing it again at the beginning of the year. We do these quarterly, and we have a lot of fun because we really do take a unique approach to make sure that the authors are comfortable. We're there. We don't change the way you write either. I mean, how's that experience? Because some people, I'm sure they're worried that they write with an editor and the editor's going to make them change their style, going to make them change how they do things. How was it for you on that?
I will concur with what you said. The process was smooth. It was well planned. In my particular case, my subject matter was pretty serious, and so the dancing around that kind of a story, I personally welcomed the edits. Um, and that might have not been the case for everyone, but I really, I guess in a sense, I was too involved in it. I mean, it's my lived experience. And then so really, I had welcomed that outside objectivity. And without that feedback, the chapter wouldn't have wound up as it did. And then so I thank both you, Susanna, and Constance for that feedback. And I recall a live stream Constance did, and she was saying how I was sharing my heart and how I was sharing my story and myself, and how I was kind of expectant as well of you guys to be careful with it as well.
Right.
And I gathered that, and I appreciate it, and it was a good experience, and that's why I'm coming on to give another chapter to the world.
And that's a lot of the authors. It really is what you just experienced. It becomes very personal, and we've figured out how to work with authors because sometimes there's too much detail, and so we know how to help work and get it down because also, like you said, this is a continuation of your last one. This is something that you can use for your own business, right?
Yes, and that's exactly where I want to go, into the organizational culture, and it ties into belonging. Even before my wanting, before you guys announced this book, I always used to say, I always used to question, well, okay, well, why do people create spaces? Why do we want spaces, so called, for belonging? Are you creating these spaces truly for the individuals, or is this space just going to wind up being a recruitment tool, or is this space just going to be a means for you to have access to these people? And that ties into, culture, power, and not, maybe even some nefarious and insidious kind of things not everyone thinks about regularly. But I'd like to bring this kind of things out because it needs to be known and it needs to be addressed. Why all of a sudden everyone wants to create a space for belonging? Um, you know, so I myself, I want to take that impetus and really take advantage of it. What I write in Against the Grain.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to what you're going to end up adding to this one. But now I want to turn it to you because you are the focus for today, and you do so much. Let's start just by giving everybody a little taste of who is Miguel, and I'm not going to quite do the 20-year question that CJ often uses in the live streams, but something like that. Where did you come from? How did you get here? And what are you doing? And then we'll deep dive into this one.
Well, I'm from New York. I was born and raised in New York City, East Harlem, and that in of itself is ingrained in my culture. I live in Harlem. Harlem has a reputation all of its own, separate from New York City. And I'm the child of two Puerto Ricans. So I was first generation, born here. I have two siblings. And my family, it was very tight niched, and then moving circumstances, and then that kind of separated us. And like having more space, it's funny how having more space um drifted us farther apart. And that's an interesting dynamic because as family grows, you need space to accommodate that as well. And so my upbringing is very humble, low income family. I lived in they're called the projects here, low income housing developments. And growing up in this type of environment, you witness things, you experience things, and you don't really question them, because it's like, you know, it's commonplace. It becomes commonplace. It's everywhere. It's just what happens. And then it wasn't until I remember in sixth grade, I was a gifted child. I was always getting good grades, and so I always loved learning. Education was always something that came easy to me, learning. And so after I forgot what I was saying. Um, oh yeah, in sixth grade, and it was social studies, and I really wasn't a fan of the social sciences at that time. Um, and then it wasn't until I was reading in that textbook about the Head Start program, the history of Head Start, and I was in Head Start, and so I was like, oh, cool. Let me, learning about something I personally had benefited from. But then the chapter started out, okay, Head Start is low income only. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, so I'm poor. And this, like, I had to learn this in school. And so it had just developed more and more. And then as I got into college, and I had a little more freedom in my elective courses, but it was still a lot of the same trope of, okay, this type of programming is for these kind of people, and this certain demographic um, has all these associated statistics with it. And once again, it's just like, okay, you don't really question these things. It's just like, all right, I'm a statistic. And yeah, that followed me through most of my life. And I've always wanted to try and go into school. That was like the stressor of my life, was why don't I have my bachelor's? I need the bachelor's. I have to have the bachelor's. And I was kicking myself a lot, putting myself down a lot for not being able to. And so I wound up becoming I was a non-traditional student when I did finish college. I wasn't 18. I wasn't an 18-year-old freshman. And at the same time, as you all will discover if you read my chapter, throughout that time, I was homeless as well. And discovering anthropology, I was interested in biology. That was my thing. I wanted to be a biologist. And the freedom of anthropology is really what allowed me to become a professional. It allowed me to gain an identity, and it allowed me to observe these patterns and behaviors in a different scope. Um, like, for example, I took a class on trauma, which was very interesting. And, that course on trauma allowed me to view trauma objectively, to view systemic trauma outside of myself, to view it in the broad scale. There's those three circles: the individual, and then family, and then community, and then the larger society.
Right.
And that was like the first inkling of combining, not really combining, how do I want to say this? Placing myself as the subject matter in anthropological research. And this is known as autoethnography. And it kind of clashes with the regular sciences. Regular sciences want objectivity. And with the objectivity, the researcher can't be involved at all in what they're observing. And I had a special opportunity because in a pretty uh I was in a situation myself that needed to be observed, needed to be documented, needed to be researched because this is
Right.
important stuff. And so I took it about myself, and then the anthropology allowed me to do that. And you know, after finishing that bachelor's, I wanted to learn more. I wanted to keep learning. I wanted to be more involved in larger societal problems outside of just myself and my scope. And then so I got involved in community leadership right after the bachelor's. I enrolled in a advanced certificate in community leadership. This involved an internship. I had to take 12 graduate credits in one semester. Um, Quite a course load, but I wound up getting a 3.9 GPA. And all of those 12 credits transferred into a master's program. And I finished my Master's of Arts in Urban Studies this May. And yeah, now I'll stop there, see if you have any questions.
It's so much there. And so just real quick, so you've got the bachelor's and master's now.
Yes, but I started with I have an associate's as well in natural sciences. That was the first
Okay.
program I had. And interestingly, like I said, I had an interest in biology. I wanted to be a biotechnologist, actually a bioinformaticist, basically a computer programmer for biological research.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of my biology credits transferred into the anthropology program, which was enlightening because, it makes sense. If you look into it, it makes sense. I mean, biology, humans, it makes sense. So a lot of my biology credits transferred into anthropology. I enjoyed the freedom of the program. Like I said, those
Oh yeah.
free electives, you know, the biology program, like I said, I was trying for so long. It wasn't the academics. I was a good student. It was just life, other circumstances outside of my aptitude that was preventing me from finishing that degree, that specific degree. And I was at the point, like I said, I was not an 18-year-old freshman anymore. I was at the point where, look, this got to get done. I need, this has to get finished. What am I able to? What can I finish now?
Right.
And that was like the precipice of what wound up where I am now.
I'm gonna put this up. You've kind of already started answering this in terms of some of that inspiration. So there's an inspiration to pursue anthology for something else that you didn't touch on. But then, is there a particular culture or time period that fascinates you the most?
It's interesting. The I'd say the time period that fascinates me the most is our contemporary now, you know, and that's where I want to be. Like I'm researching contemporary issues, in particular power, language, and all of that. So in my view, the contemporary is exciting now. The time we're in now, um, and that's where I want to work in. Like my that's why I like applied research, because applied research is now. You're obtaining that data now. That data didn't exist until you went and obtained it. And so that's why I want to specialize in applied research, because it deals in the contemporary. As a particular culture I find interesting are the Inuit.
So
And
that would
yeah.
be which get. I want to try and make sure I got it right because I'm thinking Greenland, I'm thinking Alaska, I'm thinking North Canada, all of the
Yeah.
above.
All the above. The Inuit are in the northwestern region of America. They're also in Canada. There's some in Greenland. They're very dispersed. It's a very large, yeah, very large dispersal of human population. But what interested me about this culture is, and what I wanted to, one, I wanted to write about a culture out of my own. That was the purpose of this. Like, okay, I want to research something that I don't know about.
Right.
Yeah.
Ah,
And then, make it harder on myself, you know? And so that led, and then secondary to that, okay, I want to research something I don't know anything about. And then secondary to that, I wanted to observe human cultures in harsh environments, like, the
right.
effect of the environment upon the individual, upon the culture, and upon the behavior. And I wrote that paper in my bachelor's. It's called Climate Change and Human Variation. And it speaks about three types of human variation. You have genetic variation, we have phenotype variation, and then also one that doesn't get thought about much is social behavioral variation. And the way I had explored these types of variations by using the Inuit was through anthropological genomics, relating to DNA of ancient Mexican tribes. And so, taking this DNA, they took DNA from 100 native Mexicans. And then with that DNA, they were able to, they replicated it, and they do a lot to the DNA in order to get it to replicate. But it was discovered, they found parts of DNA in those 100 natives that related to origins on the other side of the world, normally around, you know, Asia and Paleo Indian
Right.
area of the world. And then it was interesting that that was proof of basically the Inuit, which is now, concentrated in that northwestern part of America, but they had originally originated from the other side of the world. And then so the way I presented this in my paper was, okay, well, these are considered native tribes here in America, you know, but not even Native Americans were, originated from here. So
Right.
it's further evidence of humanity's origins not beginning on this side of the planet. And it fascinated me as well. I had tied it into economics at the time of that paper, the after the 2008 economic crash, how uh, America wanted to boost the economy in some way. And then the way they had went about it was the American Reinvestment Act,
Hmm.
which provided funding to green technology. Uh, you know,
Right. Very
you know,
familiar with that. I was
yeah,
involved with that at that time.
yeah. And in comparison, and then so then taking that comparatively, as far as like behavior, like I said, the three types of variation, behavioral now comparing a commercial class society to the Inuit culture, who doesn't trade in commerce. They actually live off the land. There was a recipe I discovered for they'll use Labrador tea leaves, and then they'll rub it in with seal fat, and it turns into an ointment that they rub on their chest for respiratory problems. And so this connection was so innate in that culture, but and they're so tied to their environment, this Inuit culture, but they are the most impacted by commercialism and industrialism, because the commercial societies are the ones who are ruining the environment for those who are actually living in it.
Right.
And so that was very interesting I knew nothing about this, and then so just to explore all of this was just very fascinating for me personally. And that paper was unique because it was like pieces. I was like taking pieces from this class and this class and this class, and so it's like the Frankenstein of my work was this paper I wrote.
Oh, I like the way you put that, the Frankenstein of your work.
Yeah, yeah, because it was like maybe five different final assignments, and then compiled it all into one comprehensible piece. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of it.
Awesome. And yeah, I'm listening to it, thinking of it, thinking of some of the stuff that I've seen about all of this. And like I said, when you talked about the aura, I know very well those aura dollars going into the green energy, and I know what happened when those dollars dried up too. It's like a lot of opportunities dried up with it.
Yeah, and it was like even industry, like okay, federal money, wow, let's pivot. Even the businesses changed. Okay, well, hey,
Mhm.
the government's giving money for green stuff, let's turn green, you know.
Yep.
And then that led to what's called eco-modernism, which is I also bring into the paper, which is a new cultural trend, social movement called eco-modernism, which is how can we maintain this fabulous lifestyle we have, but at the same time not harm the environment. And then this is a new cultural phenomena that has, been as a result of that federal money.
Yeah. There's so much there, and I know we're not going to go down that path because I have more for you. Um, how do you think anthropology, because we just started, you're going into this stuff, can help us better understand and address the current social issues? So we've kind of talked a little bit about environment, but what about social?
For me, I lament to even say this, but it's the truth.
Oh, you froze again.
Our common human is become
You froze, Miguel. I don't know if you can hear me, but yeah, you stopped. He'll be right back. But I'm loving this conversation because I've read about some of the Inuit stuff. And to hear, I mean, we always hear about that landmass, that the bridge between continents, between Asia and the U.S. and the Americas, and how people were supposed to have gone across that to get over here. And so just to hear Miguel talk about what he's learned about that from studying the DNA, anthropology, it's become a lot of fun here just learning about these different things, and I can't wait for him to get back and be able to talk about the social issues because he, he did talk about the e- environment, and he's back. So we are back to our question.
yes. So yeah, I've received flack over not asking about the race question. I mean, really, like I'm the researcher, I'm the design, I'm the applied anthropologist. I'm the one that gets to decide the questions I ask, and I'm really personally, I'm not interested in race. I mean, growing up, it's like all you hear about. It's so fascinating. Oh yeah. Oh, what are these racial dynamics? What are these racial dynamics? People get tired of hearing about that. And me personally, it's refreshing to me. I find it okay. Let's talk about these social factors and these social dynamics and keep race out of it.
Yeah. Um, so you're looking at that, but then what? How are you really staying away from that, and what are you shifting, pivoting to really make your focus to keep race out of that picture? Because the way you're talking, it sounds like even your professors are probably wondering why it's not there.
Well, it was one. It was one professor and then one actually in the industry. And one told me that, oh, health outcomes are important. They rely on races and all this stuff. And I said, yeah, that's true. But for like, if you want an example, language, we'll take for example. I had an interest in observing speech, but I wanted to observe how speech utilization places us into groups, just on the way on how we speak and how our prose presents itself. And I had also, like you said, I wanted to keep race out of this question because that's usually the first thing. Oh, how does someone talk? Usually it's associated with their race right away. That's the first thing. And so this was actually, once again, like I was making it harder on myself. How am I going to tie this into it's something so ingrained? And then researching, I found the way to do it. And it's called the indexicality of language, where the way you speak just innately associates you with other speakers who also speak that way.
Right.
Right. And then if you take race out of that, then what would the other types of groupings or classifications that one could fall in by the types of way that they speak? You can be associated to a intellectual class, non-intellectual class. You could be associated with a criminal class if you're speaking a certain type of way. You could be associated with, there's other areas and realms of investigation involving these social dynamics that are separate and apart from race. And then the one professor I did had that said, "Oh, well, that the race question would be very interesting in this examination." And I said, "Well, in my mind, I was like, well, it might be interesting to you. You know, um, you and I are not the same color." And I left the question out.
Well, and when you talk about how people talk, one of the first things I go to is thinking about how I talk about one of the boxes people can get stuck in is because of their non-regional accent.
Hmm.
So even as you start talking, it's like, well, then there's the New York accent versus the way New Yorkers will talk versus those in Boston versus the South versus the Midwest versus it's like take your pick is another way of looking at it. So
Yeah, and it's very interesting because, like you said, regions. If we start talking about regions, I just finished a master's in urban studies that involves geography, space, and things like that. And so you're talking about regions, and I'm preparing a current literature review now. Um, People can speak in a region. Like, a region doesn't have defined geopolitical borders, you know.
no,
So a language and a type of speech or a type of dialect could be shared in a particular region that's undefined by politics.
yeah.
And that observation, how would you observe that? You'd have to take the state out of that question as well, which is similar to what I'm mentioning about race.
Well, and I'll just real quick go back to when the movie Fargo came out. Because I remember when that came out, and then you're hearing that thick Midwest accent the way others are hearing it, but yet I had family there, and so they're commenting. It's like I don't know what everybody's talking about. That's not how we talk. It's like it's like yes, it is, but
Like, the way, to give a little more explanation, like the way I went about that was I used the Chicano language, Chicanos and Chicanas, which are the Mexican and native Mexicans and the American culture coming together and creating a new form of language, the Chicano language. And this style of language, there's a certain style, it's almost purposeful, using grammar that's inappropriate in this type of discourse that goes on in Chicano language. And this is an example of defiance. Like, this group has been so marginalized that their existence, they had to create their own existence. Like, the Mexicans didn't understand them. The American culture didn't understand them. So they merged together. And then the way they found that shared identity and this community is through the development of new language practices. And that's human evolution in essence.
Mm-hmm. I see we had we almost at 1,200 people on YouTube. So thank you everybody for joining us on YouTube. It's been great. And um, can you share a fieldwork experience or research finding that changed your perspective on viewing human behavior or culture?
Um, Fieldwork research. I Yeah, the like I said, the language thing was very interesting to me. Now the research, I mean, the field experience, is what I talk about in my chapter. I mean, my lived experience of being homeless, and taking that experience and turning it into anthropological research. Um, I say that's the most, someone once told me, they were like, oh, like, don't you have to go away? You have to like, to get a master's in anthropology. Don't you have to like go visit a culture and observe them for like a year or two? And I was like, listen, I believe me, I was placed in a culture I knew nothing about, and I observed that subculture very, very well. And but it was interesting that dynamic of certain people not caring, other people wanting to be involved. And my prospect of designing a research project in that setting in of itself created a welcoming space for belonging. I said, listen, this is me. This is who I am. This is the project I'm doing. If you provide me informed consent, hey, you know, answer these questions. And that in of itself, I mean, I guess I'm placing a little bit about more about my actions than what was observed. But yeah, it created a space of belonging where, like, wow, this man is turning his experience into something written, tangible. Let me want to be involved in this as well. I have something I want to share as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is my experience. You're sharing your experience. And those are the inklings of grassroots movements, particularly in disadvantaged groupings, disadvantaged environments. That is how one can start community leadership and development in their own spaces that they already occupy. And yeah, if you read the chapter, um, you'll not really that not that it changed me. Like, I didn't change. What changed for me in doing this observation was the organization of it, and the originality of it, and the impact of it. Um, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and as we're going through, I mean, I'm hearing so much, and when it came to that chapter, especially like in the last book, when you wrote that, there's so much. so much personal experience, but the stuff that you saw and the stuff that you experienced was to read it. It's just to sit back and kind of go, wow, how did you get through that? And the stuff that you saw and the close calls that you had. And I mean, you were living in the midst of behave of human behavior, yet I'm, it seems like there was changes going on at that time too, because a lot of that was during the period of COVID as well.
Yes. Oh well, that yeah, that became a important part of the research was the onset of COVID. Like we actually had to well we I mean the the other students, but just talking about myself, like the project pivoted. Like that semester already started and it was in person. Then COVID hit and we had to switch and pivot everything online virtually. Like I thank God, the school helped me out. Um, the school was aware of my situation and they provided me economic assistance that allowed me to finish my education. And I'm very appreciative of that. I mean, they provided me the technology, they gave me the laptop computer, they gave me the hotspot, the wireless internet in order to do it. And I'm living in the homeless shelter, so I was very appreciative of all this. And then, but that's what was being exposed as well, is that there were disparities already going on,
Right,
but then COVID just exposed it even more. And that was what I had wanted to emphasize, was that, and then New York City being the epicenter, you know, most of the deaths happening in New York, and services being shut down, human services, like you had to have a piece of paper to even cross the bridge from Jersey to get into New York, that you are required to work. You had to be an essential worker to even enter the city. And yeah, so that change exposed so much, but I will not say that it has changed anything really.
okay. Well, and that kind of leads us into this question of how has studying anthropology shaped your views in the ways cultures adapt and change over time? Because here you're already talking about, in this latest period, you're not seeing the changes that could have happened. Then, as you look at over time, because I'm sure that you've studied with anthropology, I'm sure you've studied a lot of different periods. Like, what have you seen the way cultures adapt and change over time?
It's funny, involving my urban studies program, it was very interesting. The urban origins, we were talking about the creation of civilization, early human evolution, the what even constitutes civilization, what constitutes a city, how many people make a city, you know and then so that was enlightening for me, that historical context of you know human development even before civilization. And that was fascinating to me, but at the same time it was repulsive. I found most of it repulsive in the language, and how in the contemporary, we're being subjected to absorbing this kind of context and this kind of material. Like I actually took issue with it, that okay, you're serving a particular population, urban population, a particular population of students, and you're just making them consume this vile trope. Like I actually had to emotionally detach myself from certain weekly assignments because of the material I had to read. Um, involving racism, involving, you know, human chattel, and property, and you know. So what I have deduced and what I have observed is the political influence of municipalities, and how institutions are being judged more favorably than human individuals. And this is something that I want to bring light to. I'm working on it now in a literature review, of structured language, and going back to language, how institutions, so it's basically institutions, um, are using language to, I mean, could say in a sense, manipulate people to get a desired income. They're controlling the information, the pipeline of information, how that information is presented. And unfortunately, modern society today is so bombarded with information coming in from all places, on all places, and all places. And these things don't get presented, they don't get talked about, they just get pushed to the side. And it's something really that I want to bring forth attention, because it's like you have these spaces, especially in community leadership, public domains, people in positions of power. They really need to be asked, okay, what are you doing in this position? Why are you presenting this argument? And it just seems that nowadays people are just consumed with other things than even realizing what they're even being told. What are they being fed in comparison to private interest, which once again fall into the hands of institutions and not people?
Right. Well, our time has just flown by, and I know the TV, they'll cut us off soon enough. So I want to thank you for being here and being able to talk about this in anthropology, because we don't hear enough about it either. And so before you go, I want to make sure that you get a chance to tell people how to reach you, how to find you, and what you're here for, what you can do for them.
Well, thank you very much, Susanna. I appreciate it. And so, my website, I can be reached at www.daar.llc. And my contact information is on there. Email, phone number is on there. And what I offer is applied research. That's what I want to offer, is the designing of the research for you. As you've maybe heard me for the past hour talking about research design and the questions you ask and things like this, these matters are important, because there's faces of power, and then actually the second face of power is what gets put on the agenda and what doesn't get put on the agenda. And this is, once again, something that doesn't get asked, because the even by you not choosing to discuss an issue on a particular agenda, that is an expression of your power in deciding what people are allowed to discuss and not. So, to translate that into a business context, it would involve observation. Anthropology involves observation, observational methods, interviewing, participant observation, covert observation. If you read my chapter, you'll see how covert observation can occur even if you're not involved in the activity. And so these are just all things that tie into the research design, which ties into the ultimate question and what you want to ask.
Yep.
And a good researcher will design the research in a way that involves the community. And then this is what's is important, and this is what anthropology is about, is involving the people who are subject matter of the research into the designing of that same research.
Awesome. All right, it's been great, and yeah, we're probably a little bit over, but I'm glad we had this chance to talk, and I look forward to future conversations. It's great. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. And the time really did went by. I didn't. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you, everybody, and CJ should be back. Well, she'll be back Thursday show and next Sunday. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.